Just thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I think it's exciting that so many students are interested not only in medicine and public health, but also seeing how those two careers can be combined. And it's just exciting to see such a big interest. Kind of like a little bit of what already was said, I decided to do my MPH between my third and fourth year of medical school. But for me, probably a little background would help. I was interested in public health even before coming into medical school. So I was able to work 2 years at a place called Access Health. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's in Spartanburg. There's different locations. But what they do is they coordinate care for people that don't have any health insurance through a network of donated services. And that was just a great job before starting medical school because it allowed me to see what it looked like not to have health insurance, what it looked like not to get care. And I got to talk to people individually. I was basically the person that enrolled people in the program. So kind of those 2 years of experience, along with some other things I got to do, made me realize that how important it is to look outside in the community, right? That you can provide care and you can maybe give a prescription, but if you really don't look at the structural barriers that people come from, you're really not doing them justice. So kind of a little bit of that. But I decided to do medical school instead of doing just public health because I really like the medical aspect, that you can really do a lot with people by providing them the care that they need, right? But then I don't know how you guys felt with med school, but sometimes it's a lot of hard work. You know, you're studying really hard for tests. It's 1 month at a time. You go, and sometimes there's not room to think about these social determinants of health. There's not room to think about how you can do better in the community and how you can do outreach work. So for me, taking that year was really a time to pause, take all those 3 years of medical knowledge I was able to get, and really then kind of put it through the lens of public health, if that makes sense. So I think it's in the nature of medical school not to allow time for that, not because it's not important, but because there's so much to learn, there's so much you have to master, right? Kind of being able to take those 3 years with the 2 years of work experience that I had and be able to look at it through public health was so important to me. So that's kind of a little bit of why I chose public health and why I chose it the time that I chose it. It was just a perfect timing of previous experience, medical experience, putting it all together and taking a year to focus on public health. So I don't know how you guys want to do it. I didn't really prepare any PowerPoints. I wanted it to be very casual, and I wanted you guys to have an opportunity to ask questions. The floor is open to whatever you'd like to know. And I also have some good websites that I found useful as I tried to get the application ready and I get the whole process going for me to be able to take that year off. Yeah.
How did you decide what you wanted to focus your master's in public health in?
So every school is a little bit different. That's a great question because so you have masters in public health, right? But like you said, there's different focuses. You can do epidemiology, you can do biostats. Some programs have maternal and child health. Some programs have a global health track. And it really is school dependent. So some schools allow you to pursue those tracks that are traditionally 2 years. So most of these MPH programs are 2 years if you do maternal and child health or if you do epidemiology. And some of them condense it because they kind of already assume that you're academically prepared, considering you did 3 years in med school. And then they condense it, but still the same credit hours, and do it in 1 year. So it really depends on the school. At UNC, they have something called Public Health Leadership Program, and that's kind of what you do if you're a third-year medical student taking that gap year, or if we had a lot of classmates that were fellows, so some of them were like a pediatric nephrology fellow, and part of his fellowship was to do an MPH. But it wasn't in epidemiology or biostats. It was kind of like a general MPH program, and then you could tailor the second part of that semester based on your interest. But some schools are very much condensed epidemiology, condensed biostats. So it's just really school dependent, depending where you want to go. Yeah.
Can you apply to an MPH school with your MCAT scores? Do you have to take the GRE? And also, you said you wanted to go into internal medicine. Are there other fields that you feel like that Master's in Public Health would be beneficial? Other different specialties, residencies, whatnot?
Right. So to answer the first part of that question, as far as test scores, what I found that was extraordinarily helpful, because last thing I wanted to do was take another standardized test, was that most of them take your MCAT score. And I think it's already a little bit assumed that since if you were able to successfully complete 3 years in medical school, that you're going to be successful completing their one-year program. But the nice thing is that most programs take your MCAT. I didn't find a program that I personally applied to that I had to take the GRE. So that's the first part of the question. The second part, whether, depending on the residency program that you do, whether it's beneficial. And I really think it's program dependent. There's some programs that their focus is to train you as a good clinician, whether it's surgery, whether it's internal medicine, whether it's pediatrics, and that's what they're, at the end of the day, that's what they're going to turn out as good clinicians. And there's some programs that are focused in population health and focused in working out in the community. So I think it's program dependent. Granted, I think you're probably going to find it easier that there's going to be programs that that are focused more in the community when it's like primary care related. So I would think like internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics, you're probably going to find more programs that are willing to do population health, that are willing to invest in the community, that are willing to do QI projects, that better access, that better resources for the community versus maybe some surgical subspecialties. Because at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is make sure you're good at your task as a surgeon. Not to negate that there are programs that that also focus on that, but you also have to think of the specialty and what their goals are. Might be a little bit different. So I think overall, I think you can find a program that cares about that. That's what I'm currently looking for now. And I think despite your specialty, taking into account that maybe some specialties, maybe surgical, maybe more specialized, might not have that focus because it's not part of their training. Other question?
So I have a few questions. The first one is, how helpful was the school helping you take the gap year, and like how do they help students? The second one was, how was the transition back into clinical after taking a whole year of not interacting with patients and being away from the books? And I'll wait for the third one after.
Yeah.
after this.
Okay. Yeah. So the first part of the question, so you're saying how helpful was the school in helping me with the application process and all that? Well, granted, it was a little bit challenging because I was the first one. So it was an idea. I was like, well, I would love to take a year to do an MPH. And I thought the school would be like, no, little girl, sit down. No, we're not going to do this. And they said yes, right? And I was like, oh, great. Now I have to do something about it. They said I could. Now I have to follow through. So since it wasn't really a path set out, the way it worked out for me was I had to meet with Dr. Crespo, who I think somebody else is in her position now, but kind of basically state my case. So I would say you probably go to Maggie or Ann Green and say, hey, this is something I'm really interested in, and then they probably set you up to talk to one of the deans in the school and kind of state your case of why do you really want to do this. And then from there, they had me write a letter to Junior Yuki, kind of again stating my case in writing and kind of saying my purpose is to go and I'm going to come back, don't worry. So that was kind of my process. And once both of them said yes, I think they sent me an email, okay, it was on me to kind of go and find out how you do it. So I went on SOFAS, did the application process. Again, since there wasn't anybody from our school that had done it before, I kind of just felt it out and was like, oh, I think this is what you do. So I think now that they have one student that has done it and at least has come back and it's been fine, I think they're probably going to, I would imagine, streamline the process a little bit more and make it easier for future students. But it wasn't challenging at all. I think I was more shocked that they said yes and that they're like, yeah, if you would, you make it happen. And as long as you go and you come back, then the school has no problem. So they were, considering it was very new, they were really open to it, which I was really thankful for. And they were also, I think that kind of sets the precedent that they will be supportive moving forward. Oh, what was the second part? Sorry.
How was the transition back into clinical years?
Right. I was a little bit concerned about that because it's been a year, right? It's been a year with no patient contact, with not having to do your differential, with not having to do your problem list and figure out what test you want. So a couple things that I did was when I was at Chapel Hill, I volunteered at their student-run free clinic. It wasn't a lot, but it was like once a month that I tried to do it. And then I also was part of a quality improvement project that allowed me to see patients in the hospital. And the whole purpose of that project was to see how we can better coordinate outpatient care when somebody is inpatient to outpatient. So I would go see them in the hospital. I would go see them in their like facility, their long-term care facility, and then follow their care through just to make sure they were getting their kind of right appointments, they were getting their medications. It's a great project, but it kind of kept my, I like to think about it, kept my toes in the medicine water, right? So I wasn't completely removed from it, but I wasn't immersed in it because that's what I wanted. I wanted a year where I could step away from medicine and just do public health. But it still, I had a little bit of practice seeing patients and thinking about their problems and looking at medication. So it wasn't a lot, but it was some, and I think that helped. So that when I came back, I did a rotation in July. And the way I did it is I didn't want to like jump right in because I was like, that would be too much. It would be too hectic. So I did an outpatient rotation that kind of collaborated with FQHC, and we did outpatient like community health fairs. What else did we do? Like classes in the community, farmers market, and also did like outpatient primary care. So that was like a good rotation to transition in because it was like public health and outpatient primary care, two things that I wanted to do right before doing my AI in August, which is your acting internship, where you're in the hospital all the time. So, yeah.
I got another question. How would you compare, day to day and any of the like the requirements and curriculum from like an MPH versus your medical school? How would they compare? Was the MPH a little bit more manageable than medical school? About the same?
Right. I really felt it was definitely manageable, absolutely manageable. One thing with the program at UNC is that you're still doing the same amount of credit hours as a master's student, but you're doing it in a year. So where a master's students would have it 2 years to complete it, you're doing the same amount of work in 1 year, right? So it's not like they're like, oh, they're going easy on you. You're doing less hours. No, you're still doing the same amount of work. But I feel, or I really did feel that managing med school and its demands was kind of made it a good transition for the courses in public health. Additionally, I felt like they were, I guess maybe for me, because I was using a different part of my brain, and it wasn't like the sequential testing every month. It was gathering information, writing papers, working in groups, a lot of group work, but we do that in med school too. I felt like it was using a different part of kind of how I think and how I process information. So demanding, yes, I'm not going to say it was like, oh, you don't do anything, guys, it's great. I think it's adequately demanding, but definitely doable. And if you did med school, you'll be fine during an MPH.
For your residency and then beyond, what would be your ideal mix of this clinic and public health part? Like, how would the career look?
If I could make up my own residency and dream of how I'd want it to do, and granted, I know there's programs that are kind of focus on that. I think that the main thing I am looking for now is a program that, so I want to do primary care, so there's primary care tracks, and that they have a focus on a clinic that you work out in the community. So sometimes it can be an FQHC, sometimes it's a clinic related to the hospital or the program. But I would want to be able to work in that clinic, but also be able to continue projects or start projects that can help the community there, right? So I think sometimes it's your outpatient clinic is like, oh, I got to go to my outpatient clinic, got to see my patient panel, do that, wash my hands, go home. But I really want a program that that not only you're seeing that patient population, that's your patient panel that you follow through your 3 years, but also that you're kind of doing outreach work in the community, whether that's going to doing health fairs, doing screenings, doing farmers market, making sure people have accessible food options. So I want to be able to, wherever it is I'm doing clinic and wherever it is I'm practicing, that I see that they're investing in the community and that they give me opportunity that if I have ideas or suggestions that they would support that. Whether it's giving me the resources I need or giving me the funding I need or giving me the ways that I can get the funding that I need to do those things. So I think that's how I envision it. Now, granted, I understand also, one thing I am understanding more now is that residency is extraordinarily demanding, right? As an intern, you have no time for anything except work, go home, sleep, eat, and then maybe 2 weeks of vacation, maybe 4, depending on the program. So I understand that maybe that first year is not going to allow a lot of time for that, and I'm okay with that. I understand you have to have that year to be a good clinician. I also want the program to focus on making you a solid clinician, but kind of moving forward, even if in that first year you don't have time for that, that's okay. Moving forward, that's something that they care about and they're investing in.
Do you know whether or not there are, I know they give us opportunity to do away rotations during our 3rd and 4th year. Do you know if there's a rotation at, say, like the CDC that welcomes med school students who want to blend in that public health background?
The CDC I'm not sure about, but I think so. So the rotation I was talking about earlier in July, I did that through Kaiser Permanente, which they're kind of known to care. As a healthcare system, they're known to care about population health and looking at the big picture and looking at how to get resources and access to communities. But I did that program through Kaiser Permanente, and it's called Latino Health Elective. And it was that combination of working at FQHC, going to classes, but also doing the outpatient clinic. So that's kind of that was kind of the program I wanted. But if you want more like working at the CDC, I think there's definitely opportunities. I feel like I remember seeing that. I went to the CDC Health Leadership Summit, and there was opportunities for you to pursue things after residency, but I think there's also opportunities for med students. But definitely look at those big public health organizations. That's a great idea, and seeing what you can do 4th year.
I just have a quick question. Your master's, was that a thesis or non-thesis master's?
It's not a thesis. So I did do a master's paper,
Okay.
and with UNC, they kind of let you do it based on your particular interest. So something that I was really interested in pursuing was looking at the role of the healthcare system in human trafficking, and seeing, I just became more aware that that's something that is happening and that we as a healthcare system are seeing more of, but we might not be aware. So my master's paper, I did some qualitative interviews with providers as well as organizations that help survivors of human trafficking to see how we can better collaborate. And once somebody's identified, we still need to kind of make more standardized tools, do a better job, raise awareness so that people are getting identified. But once we do identify them, how do we plug them up to the appropriate resources? Because it's great, we say, oh, you're in this situation, that's really bad, but then if we don't have the adequate resources to kind of transition them to the care that they need, then we're really doing an injustice by just identifying somebody, right? So yeah, all that to say, it was a master's paper. It was still, like, I did qualitative interviews. I still had to do IRB, but it wasn't a thesis.
So less research-based and more, how would it, was it a researchy paper?
Yeah, it was still a research paper,
Okay.
but they count it as a master's paper and not a thesis.
Okay.
I think it would probably, for it to be a thesis, I don't know a lot, actually, about what would entail a thesis, but I would think it would have to be a little bit, or you would have to defend it. That's a big thing. You'd have to sit in front of a panel and defend it. I know that. But I think it would require a little bit more in depth.
So do you think that master's paper was your focus during school, or was it more of the classroom-based discussions and learning through that aspect of things?
So, like how I became interested in that topic?
No, more so like your master's. When you say you have a master's in public health, would you say that you focus mostly on that, or it's kind of more of a general term that you got a broader education on all of that?
Right. So for the program I went to, the first semester is focused on like the basics of what you need for a master's in public health. So you do bioepidemiology, you do biostats, you do like healthcare systems class, you do like a policy class. So you have to do your fundamentals that first semester. And that second semester, you kind of tailor the classes based on your interest.
Okay.
So I did more like global health focus. I did some courses that would help kind of guide my master's paper. So I did like a systematic review class. So it is general in the sense that it's pretty broad, and that second semester you tailor a little bit more on what your interests are. But that's specific to the program at UNC. So there might be some programs that kind of what we mentioned before, that it's already outlined. So if you're doing epidemiology, like the coursework is already set forth, or if you're doing biostats, the same thing. But with that program, I was able to tailor it a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah.
What exactly does having a master's in public health add to get your MD? So what exactly does that add to it?
That's a great question. So I think the important takeaway from this is you don't have to do your master's in public health to still be involved in the community and to still do public health work. I think that's super important. Like the degree doesn't hinder your interest or your pursuit of public health, right? So just because you don't get a chance to do the degree, or you said maybe not right now and then you didn't get to do it later, that's okay. You can still do population health work. I think for me, I just wanted a year where I could focus on that. So when I'm reading a research article, what am I critically appraising how they did the study, or how they chose their population, or how the timing of the study, or how it was funded. You know, I wanted to be able to have a time where I could sit and kind of explore these topics without and have the time to do it. So for me, I wanted that educational experience. Some people learn on the job, so they might do their residency, they might go ahead and work out in the community, and they realize, you know, I'm working with patients individually, but I could really do something more on a population level, and they do some research, they partner with other people, and they start doing more community outreach. And they never took any classes to do at MPH. One of my mentors, or one of the providers that I got to do my practicum with at UNC, she doesn't have an MPH, but she has such a public health soul that she doesn't need an MPH. She's still doing amazing work in the community, and it doesn't negate the work that she does. So I think it's a very individual decision. For me, it was like I wanted that education. I wanted a year where I could just focus on that and critically think about those things that I just hadn't had time to before.
I was also going to add to that having your MPH or any type of research degree is going to prepare you in a unique way in comparison to all of your other colleagues, because you're going to have that foundation and that background to be able to carry out a research study from start to finish. And you're going to know how what factors you need to account for. You're going to know how to go through the IRB process. You're going to know how to analyze your own data. And you're going to see that when you get on a research team, a lot of people who have not had that foundation are not going to know how to do that. So I know during my master's program and also in my PhD program, the majority of my classmates were either med school students or they were fellows. And so they were in those programs because they didn't have that foundation, and because we were at a research institution, in order to apply for grant funding and stuff, they needed to have that background. So that will definitely add value to your CV.
Is there a reason why you chose after third year versus after second year?
That's a good question. I think I had kind of put my MPH dream to rest for a while, like once I started medical school. And I think for me, going through the clinical world third year kind of reignited that for me, kind of saying, no, I really care about these things. There are some things that we're just not touching by the way we're doing medicine. Is not anything wrong with it, is that this is not the capacity where you are able to deal with some of these issues. So that was me, but I know a lot of the programs that I looked at, they take students between their third and fourth year because they want you to have a little bit of the clinical background. There was one student in my my program who did it between her second and third, but that's pretty rare. But you can, I think, and I don't know if some programs were like a hard cutoff, no, you can't. But traditionally what I've seen mostly is between your third and fourth year. And I found that helpful because of just that, like you just get a little bit of clinical exposure and you start thinking, okay, how can I blend these two worlds?
And are there activities that you did, particularly here in Greenville, that you think really helped you and led you to this?
Oh, like organizations I was involved in during my first 2 years? Yes, I think, like I said, my work experience was definitely a driver prior to med school. And then when I came here, me and some classmates, we started the Spanish club. We started SNMA, and we tried to do outreach in the community. So probably those two things. We tried to build partnerships with a local Latino high school and tried to do information sessions there. So I think for me, it was really important to stay engaged while I was in med school, and that just kind of made that transition easier because it's things that I care about, and it's things that I will continue to care about, and it was nice to be able to see that in my MPH year to kind of think about, well, how can I serve this population better?
Do you know off the top of your head if there are other programs like the program at UNC, or is that just the program for?
No, yeah, that's a wonderful question. Absolutely not. I think there's, so when I was looking, I looked at Emory, I looked at University of Miami. Granted, I was trying to find like big cities where there would be pretty large Latino populations. I looked at Boston. So there's definitely a lot of programs that will take med students, so it's not the only one. It's just the one that kind of worked for me. So I think what I suggest is if you go over here to SOFAS, you have to, I guess, let me back up and say a couple of things that is pretty important. You have to go through SOFAS, kind of like how you had to apply to med school. You have to go through an online general application process. So SOFAS is the one that you use for most public health schools. I think Johns Hopkins, they do a direct, like you apply directly to them. And they also have a program for med students between their third and fourth year. It's a little bit more tedious because you have to do another application, but if you're interested in that program, then it's worthwhile. So with SOFAS, the other thing is it's an application process, so there's money to be invested to apply to these programs. So I think the best thing you can do is go and see what schools there are and see what schools take med students. There's definitely more than UNC. There's several with different focuses. And then from there, you decide where you want to apply, right? And how much money you want to spend in applying, because it is an expensive process. I don't think it's as bad as med school, if I remember correctly, but it's still money you have to fork out. And then I think it's just a good place to start because it tells you what school to do SOFAS, and then you can kind of narrow it from there. And I think it's also important to realize, like, what is your focus? Like, do you want to work in an urban underserved population? Do you want to kind of look at more of the business side of public health and like infrastructure? Do you really want the more epidemiology biostats aspect? Because there's different programs that focus on different things that can tailor to your interest.
I know the M1s have IPM this afternoon, so
no problem.
Are there any final questions? Okay, thank you, Jessica,
No
so
problem.
much for coming.
Yeah, no problem. So one last thing I was going to leave you guys with is I'll send Erica my email. If you guys have any like specific questions, shoot me an email. I usually try to turn around by 24 hours. And then the other thing is I'll try to get like a list of resources that I found helpful, some of these links that we didn't get to talk about, and send it to Erica, and maybe she can disseminate it to you guys and see if that's helpful. Yeah, thank you.